My name is Olivia, and I am 32 years old. 5 years ago, my life, measured by the rhythm of the metropolis and projects in the world of graphic design in Seattle, abruptly changed its course. I left behind my career, prospects, and my own well-ordered existence to return to Westchester, to that very spacious 5-bedroom colonial-style mansion where I spent my childhood. This house, full of the ghosts of happy memories, was inherited by my mother from her parents, and I inherited the duty of caring for my aging father, Robert, after my mother lost her short and brutal battle with lung cancer. Before we continue, I'm very curious. What country are you from, dear listeners? Write in the comments where you are listening from. And now, let's continue. I have 2 older siblings, Ryan, 40 years old, a hedge fund analyst immersed in the world of high finance, and Madison, 38 years old, a pharmacist from Oregon. Their lives, measured by deadlines and career achievements, proved to be a reliable shield from family hardships. After our loss, they became rare guests in our father's house, always citing urgent meetings and schedules filled to the brim. These excuses were the universal language of those who prefer to avoid difficult, emotionally taxing tasks. When our mother fell ill, it was I who returned from Seattle to shoulder the care for both of them. And after her passing, I stayed. Father was broken and lost. His world had crumbled, and someone had to monitor his meals, his medications, preventing him from sinking completely into the abyss of despair. My brother and sister held a different view of the situation. Their rare, formal visits were invariably accompanied by biting remarks about my position. "You're just living here off Dad," Ryan would say, his appraising gaze sweeping over the living room as we drank coffee. His words were immediately picked up by Madison. "You're methodically spending his savings, taking advantage of his weakness." The bitter irony was that I was not a burden to my father. Years ago, I had managed my finances wisely enough, and now my investments provided a stable monthly income that fully covered my needs. But Ryan refused to accept this, brushing it off with a dismissive sneer. "Pocket change doesn't change the essence. You're still depleting Dad's resources." They criticized every decision I made concerning our father, from his daily routine to the choice of doctors. But they themselves never offered help. Not once did they volunteer to take on some of the care, invite him to live with them, or offer financial support. Their involvement was limited to grumbling and veiled reproaches. My only ally within the family circle was Uncle Thomas, my father's younger brother. He lived 3 hours away in Philadelphia, but visited us with enviable regularity. He alone understood the price of my sacrifice, openly praising me for my selflessness and devotion. His visits acted on Ryan and Madison like a red rag to a bull. They would either suddenly remember urgent matters or try to leave the house before his arrival, unable to bear his calm yet relentlessly honest assessments of their own behavior. 2 years ago, a change named Deborah entered my father's life. He met her at the rehabilitation center he attended for procedures after his hip surgery. She was 45, a physiotherapist, an attractive, charming woman with whom he found an instant connection. Their romance developed rapidly, and within 6 months, they were married. At first, I was genuinely happy for him. Deborah seemed perfect, attentive, caring. She knew how to make Father laugh, bringing back a sense of lightness and cheerfulness to the house that had been lost. For the first time in the many years since Mom's death, he truly began to come alive. Smiled more often, started joking again, and took an interest in the world around him. However, over time, alarming notes began to appear in Deborah's behavior. Her behavior began to change slowly but inexorably, like the weather before a storm. At first, it was just seemingly harmless remarks woven into leisurely evening conversations. She would admiringly mention how much such a mansion might cost now, with feigned interest discuss the soaring real estate prices in prestigious Westchester, and muse aloud about the local market conditions. Soon these conversations gave way to transparent hints, addressed personally to me, about how it was time for me to start an independent life. Every evening, as soon as Father went up to his room, Deborah would find me in the kitchen with a cup of tea, or in the living room with a book. "Don't you think a woman your age should have gotten her own place by now?" her sweet but insistent voice would sound. I would answer each time with cold calm, "I am here to take care of Dad." Her lips would form a thin smile. "He has me now. He doesn't need you hovering over him. He is my father, I would parry, feeling my fists clench, and I want to be here. She would just shake her head with an expression of pained understanding and retreat. But the next day, this exhausting ritual would repeat itself. Uncle Thomas, whose perception was always sharper than any of my suspicions, also noticed this strange dynamic. Whenever he visited, Deborah would suddenly have urgent errands or meetings that forced her to disappear from the house within an hour of his arrival. "That woman is up to something," he told me once when we were alone in the garden. "I don't trust her." I desperately wanted to believe he was wrong, that Deborah truly made Father happy, but the alarming evidence was piling up like a snowball. About a month before Father's 70th birthday, I noticed something truly strange. Ryan, my perpetually busy brother, started appearing at the house with frightening regularity. However, he didn't come to spend time with Father. Instead, he would lock himself in the study with Deborah, and they would discuss something animatedly, spreading out some papers on the desk. If I entered under some plausible pretext, they would instantly fall silent, hastily gather the documents, snap the folders shut, and minimize the open windows on the computer monitor. I began to observe them with intense, heightened attention, and soon my worst fears found horrifying confirmation. One afternoon, I caught Deborah in the kitchen by the open medicine cabinet with my father's pill bottles in her hands. With the dexterity of a magician, she was shaking out the doctor-prescribed pills and replacing them with others from the pocket of her robe. I didn't let on, didn't say a word, just froze in the doorway, feeling an icy wave of fear paralyzing my entire body. A week passed, and Father became unrecognizable. His mind grew foggy, he became drowsy, disoriented, would fall silent for long periods staring at the wall, forgot what day it was, and trailed off mid-sentence. "Your father is getting worse," Deborah would tell me, with a meticulously crafted mask of concern on her face. "Perhaps he will soon need professional help in a specialized facility." I understood what was happening. I needed proof, ironclad and irrefutable. Waiting until she was out of the house, I approached the medicine cabinet again, poured some of the substitute pills into a small transparent bag, and hid it in my room as evidence. Father's birthday was approaching. I had spent months preparing, planning a celebratory dinner of his favorite dishes, painstakingly creating a photo album compiled from our family pictures. I wanted this day to be truly special for him. But a nagging feeling told me that Deborah had completely different plans for it. One afternoon, she went out to the grocery store, leaving her laptop open on the kitchen table. She used it for everything, including managing our shared household expenses. I needed to check something for the grocery budget. At least, that's how I tried to justify to myself the step I was about to take. I sat down at the table and touched the keyboard of someone else's computer. My fingers froze over the keyboard when I saw that the tab for her personal Gmail inbox was left open. Everything inside me clenched into an icy knot at the realization that I was about to cross all boundaries, but an unknown force, stronger than the voice of reason, made me click on the very first email thread. It was a correspondence between Deborah and Ryan. My breath caught as I began to read. The emails were dated 3 years ago, long before Father appeared in her life. "I've found the perfect candidate," Ryan wrote. "A wealthy widower, owns valuable real estate, lonely after his wife's death. You know what to do." Deborah replied with cold, businesslike efficiency. "How do I meet him?" "I'll arrange everything. You work at that rehab center. I'll make sure he ends up there for his hip therapy." I feverishly scrolled down the page, my hands trembling. "Once you marry him, we'll handle the asset transfer. We'll make him sign the house over to you or put it in both your names. Then we sell and split the proceeds. What about his daughter? She lives there. We'll deal with her. She's weak. We'll drive her out." Dozens of emails revealed a dizzying web of conspiracy, plans within plans. How Deborah was to charm Father, how Ryan would visit more often to appear the caring son, how they would present Father as incompetent to take full control. And then I stumbled upon something that made my blood run completely cold. "I miss you, baby. Can't wait for this to be over and for us to be together. Soon, once we have the money for the house, we'll disappear. Your wife will never know." Ryan and Deborah were lovers. for many years. All this time, every step they took, every smile for Father, it was all part of their vile, calculated plan. With shaking hands, I took screenshots of the entire correspondence, emailed them to myself, and printed copies on the home printer. The slam of a car door snapped me out of my stupor. Deborah was back. In a panic, I closed all the tabs, made sure the laptop was positioned exactly as before, and rushed to my room. My heart was pounding so wildly, it felt like it would tear through my chest. I had to tell Father everything. Seizing a moment when Deborah was busy in the kitchen, I found him in the living room. It was late evening, and his dose of sedatives hadn't yet fully plunged him into his usual fog. This time, there was a rare clarity in his eyes. "Dad, I need to show you something," I said quietly, handing him a stack of the printed emails. He began to read slowly, peering at the lines. His face changed with each line, from simple confusion to bitter bewilderment and growing distress. "This can't be," he whispered, looking away. "Deborah loves me. Ryan, he's my son." "Dad, look at the dates," I insisted, feeling tears welling up in my throat. "They planned this even before she met you. Ryan intentionally set you up." He just shook his head, refusing to believe, pushing away the unbearable truth. "No, you don't understand. There must be some mistake." The betrayal by his own son and wife was a blow his weakened mind could not accept. Having lost all hope for his support, I called Uncle Thomas in desperation. "You need to come here, urgently," I said, and the panic was audible in my voice. The next morning, he was already with us. I gave him everything. The printed emails, the bag with the substituted pills, described Father's rapid decline. He read, and his face grew paler. "My God," he whispered, putting the papers down. "Your brother is a monster." "Dad doesn't believe me, and I don't know what to do legally," I confessed, feeling the ground slip from under my feet. Uncle Thomas, slowly, thinking through every step, nodded. "I need help. I know an attorney named Jason. He specializes in elder abuse cases. Let me call him." 2 days later, I was sitting in Jason's austere, dark-toned office. My portfolio lay on the polished table, containing all the gathered evidence, the printed emails, the bag of substituted pills, my detailed notes on Father's symptoms, and records of Ryan's visits. Jason, a man in his 50s with graying temples and a piercing, analytical gaze, studied the materials carefully. "This is a classic case of financial exploitation and elder abuse," he concluded, setting aside the last sheet. "But we need to proceed with extreme caution. Your brother is not stupid, and he and Deborah have the advantage of surprise. We need an airtight, flawless case." "Where do we start?" I asked, sensing a faint emanation of confidence from his professionalism. "The primary task is to objectively assess your father's cognitive state without the influence of the drugs they're giving him," Jason explained. "He needs an independent evaluation by a specialist. We must prove that of sound mind, he is fully competent." He gave me the business card of Dr. Patel, a renowned geriatrician who could perform a thorough assessment. "Next, we need to legally secure your father," the attorney continued. "We will need to execute new powers of attorney, both medical and financial, to replace any documents Ryan might have prepared in secret." "But how do we convince Dad to sign them if he still refuses to believe in the conspiracy?" burst out of me. "Focus on his safety," Jason advised gently. "Present it as a standard procedure to protect his assets and for estate planning. He doesn't have to believe everything at once. He just needs to trust you enough to sign." "What else?" I asked, feeling a plan taking shape. Jason leaned forward, his voice becoming quieter and more weighty. "Install hidden cameras in the common areas of the house, the living room, kitchen, hallways. We need video evidence of Deborah's actions, substituting medication, any conversations or verbal abuse." "Is that legal?" I clarified. "This is your father's house, and you, acting in his interests, have every right to install surveillance in common areas to ensure his safety," he assured me confidently. I left the meeting with a clear plan of action. The next week passed in a blur of precise, cautious movements. Dr. Patel came to the house on a day when Deborah was out on her, as always, sudden errands. He conducted a thorough, multi-hour cognitive testing. His verdict was unequivocal. Father's confusion was exclusively chemical in nature. Without the sedatives in his bloodstream, he was fully competent and thinking clearly. I showed Father the doctor's report. "Deborah has been giving you the wrong medication, Dad," I said, no longer mentioning the conspiracy, but focusing on his well-being. "That's why you've been feeling so bad. I want to protect you legally, just in case." I explained that Uncle Thomas and I should get a medical power of attorney and also update the property documents so that any transaction would require multiple signatures. At first he resisted, but Uncle Thomas, as always, found the right words. "Brother, your daughter is trying to protect you. Trust her. Sign the papers. It's a simple formality that will ensure your safety." In the end, Father agreed. We met with Jason at his office. Under his careful guidance, Dad signed a medical power of attorney, appointing me and Uncle Thomas, as well as a new limited financial power of attorney that required 2 signatures for any property transactions. He also signed an official statement expressing his wish to remain living in the family home. Now, everything was legal, everything was in force, and these documents overrode anything Ryan might have secretly prepared while Father was under the influence of the drugs. The final step was installing the cameras, tiny wireless devices artfully integrated into the decor, among the leaves of houseplants, on bookshelves, within decorative elements. They silently recorded everything happening in the common areas, gathering irrefutable evidence. I waited, and my patience was rewarded after 3 days. The hidden cameras gathered irrefutable, disgusting proof. They captured Deborah with practiced dexterity, substituting the pills in the medicine cabinet. They caught her quiet but distinct phone conversations with Ryan, where they discussed the timing and details of their sinister plan. They caught her, alone in the kitchen, contemptuously calling my father a stupid old wreck who doesn't even remember what day it is. But the most horrifying was the episode where he was slowly, with effort, trying to get up from his armchair, and she, with pursed lips, forcefully pushed him back down. I watched these recordings on my laptop screen, and my hands trembled with helpless rage. Jason, after listening to my agitated report, told me to be patient. "Let them make the decisive move," he said, and his voice was calm and confident. Father's 70th birthday was in 3 days, and a firm premonition settled in my soul that they would strike then. I was ready. The day of the anniversary arrived. I had spent weeks preparing, striving to create an atmosphere of genuine celebration. The air was filled with the aromas of his favorite dishes: slow-cooked roast beef, fluffy garlic mashed potatoes, and homemade apple pie baked from his late mother's recipe. On the coffee table lay the thick photo album, assembled from pictures capturing his entire life, with Mom, us children, from those happy, carefree times. The house filled with voices. Ryan arrived with his wife Caroline. Madison came with her husband Andrew. Father's old friends David and Susan gathered. Of course, Uncle Thomas was there. And a certain Brad was also present, whom Deborah introduced as an old friend. But I knew the truth. I had seen his business card on her desk. He was a realtor. Everyone gathered in the dining room. The meal passed in an atmosphere of feigned merriment. Toasts were made in Father's honor. He smiled, but his gaze remained cloudy and confused. The sedatives that Deborah still managed to slip him were doing their dark work. And then, when dessert was finished, Ryan stood up, clinking his knife against his glass. "Friends, I have an important announcement," he proclaimed, and a wary silence fell over the room. As you all know, Father's health has been declining. He has become confused and forgetful. It is no longer safe for him to remain alone in this big, old house. Father looked at him with a glazed, uncomprehending stare. Therefore, I, together with Deborah, have found a solution. Father has signed a power of attorney giving me the authority to manage his affairs. We have decided to sell the house and move him to a specialized care facility where he will receive proper professional care. A whisper of astonishment rippled through the room. David and Susan exchanged clearly alarmed glances. Then Ryan turned to me, and a smug, triumphant smile spread across his face. "Olivia, pack your things. You'll have to find another place to live. Your free ride is over, you loser." Deborah beamed. Brad, the realtor, nodded approvingly. Madison looked shocked but remained silent, and her husband Andrew shifted uneasily in his chair. Uncle Thomas was the first to recover. He stood up sharply, his face flushed with anger. "Wait just a minute. This is outrageous. You can't just sell Robert's house like that." "I have the legal authority," Ryan countered coldly. "The power of attorney gives me full control. This is elder abuse, plain and simple. This is family business. Stay out of it, Uncle Thomas." A heated, fruitless argument erupted. Deborah immediately chimed in, her voice trembling with meticulously feigned hurt. Caroline sat silently, looking completely lost, while David and Susan whispered to each other in outrage. Taking advantage of the commotion, I slipped silently from the room into the hallway and with trembling fingers dialed Jason's number. "They've made their move," I whispered into the phone. "They announced the sale of the house and sending Dad to a nursing home." "Perfect," his calm voice came through. "I am with Dr. Patel right now. We will be there in 10 minutes. I returned to the living room. Uncle Thomas was still arguing heatedly, his face crimson. Ryan was shouting about his legal rights, and Deborah was sobbing crocodile tears, recounting how hard it had been for her alone, caring for a helpless old man. Father simply sat in his armchair, completely lost and frightened by the sudden chaos that had descended upon his celebration. Exactly 10 minutes later, as promised, there was a measured but insistent ring at the door. I opened it, and the imposing figure of Jason in an impeccable suit with a leather briefcase in hand appeared in the doorway. Next to him, maintaining a calm, professional composure, stood Dr. Patel. Together we proceeded into the living room, where our appearance was met with a charged silence. "Who are these people?" Ryan demanded sharply, his voice trembling with sudden anxiety. I took a step forward, feeling all the gathered energy focus in my words. "Everyone, please listen to me carefully. What my brother has just stated is not only immoral, but also a criminal act." Ryan snorted, trying to maintain his mask of contempt. "What are you even talking about?" "Deborah has been systematically giving Father strong sedative drugs without his knowledge or consent," I stated clearly and distinctly. "That is why he was confused and disoriented. She intentionally created artificial symptoms of dementia to present him as incompetent." Deborah's face turned white as a sheet. "That's ridiculous. I would never dare," burst out of her. But her eyes held a look of animal fear. It was then that Jason spoke, his baritone filling the room, leaving no room for objection. "My name is Jason Mitchell. I represent Miss Olivia. We have video recordings obtained from hidden cameras, which clearly show Mrs. Deborah substituting the medication prescribed to Robert. Furthermore, we have pharmacy reports confirming her purchase of drugs not prescribed by his physician." He opened his briefcase and extracted a hefty folder of documents. David and Susan, Father's old friends, froze, listening to every word. Then I held up my phone, turning the screen towards the gathering. "And this is an email correspondence between Ryan and Deborah, starting 3 years before she met our father. In these emails, they discuss finding a victim with valuable real estate. Ryan personally identified our father as the perfect target. They planned to have Deborah marry him, transfer the property, and sell it." Madison's jaw dropped in shock. "What?" "They have been hatching this plan for years," I continued, and my gaze fell on Caroline, Ryan's wife, who was pale as a ghost. "But that's not all. I am terribly sorry, Caroline, but Ryan and Deborah have been lovers for many years. It's all detailed in their correspondence. This was their vile plan all along, to marry Father, drug him, steal the house, and run away together." The room exploded into chaos. Voices merged into a deafening roar. Caroline screamed and lunged at Ryan, her face contorted with pain and fury. Madison stared at her brother with soul-chilling disbelief. David and Susan looked deeply shocked. Uncle Thomas just nodded grimly, his worst fears confirmed. "It's a lie. Everything she said is a lie," Deborah shrieked, but her voice was full of desperation, not righteous anger. Dr. Patel stepped forward smoothly. "Mr. Robert, with your permission, I would like to take a sample of your blood for an immediate toxicology screen to detect the presence of unprescribed medication." Father, still weak but with a glimmer of clarity appearing in his eyes, slowly nodded. "Yes, please, do it." Dr. Patel quickly and professionally performed the procedure. Jason, meanwhile, raised new documents. I also have in my possession a valid medical power of attorney signed by Robert, appointing Thomas and Olivia as his legal representatives. This document completely annuls any fictitious powers of attorney Mr. Ryan is referring to." Ryan's face contorted. "That's impossible. Father signed the documents for me." "Documents signed under the influence of psychoactive substances have no legal force," Jason parried coldly. "Moreover, Robert has signed a directive requiring 2 signatures for any real estate transactions, as well as an official statement of his wish to remain in the family home." A deathly silence fell over the room, in which Deborah's choked sobs were clearly audible. This time, the tears were real. "Fine. You want the truth?" she exhaled, broken. "Ryan came to me with this plan 3 years ago. He said his father was rich, had a big house, and was lonely. He said we could take it all. We've been together for years. His wife didn't know. I only married Robert for the money and this house. That's the whole truth. Are you happy now?" This bitter exclamation came not from me, but from Caroline. Her voice, rising to a scream, was filled with such pain and betrayal that the air in the room thickened again. She unleashed a torrent of words at Ryan, while Madison, pale as death, covered her mouth with her hand in horror, unable to utter a word. Jason, maintaining icy calm, continued, and his words dealt Ryan a new, crushing blow. "I must also mention that our investigation has established that over the past year, Mr. Ryan has transferred $50,000 from his father's accounts to his personal accounts. This is a direct act of financial exploitation of an elderly person." And then Father spoke. His voice, low and trembling just an hour before, sounded loud and firm, regaining the clarity I hadn't heard in many months. "Ryan, Deborah," he said, and his words, like a blade, cut through the chaos, forcing everyone to fall silent and freeze. "Get out of my house. Now." Deborah, sobbing, grabbed her purse. "This is your fault," she hissed as she passed me, and her eyes burned with pure, unadulterated hatred. "You ruined everything." With those words, she ran out of the living room. Ryan, however, didn't move, his face twisted in a grimace of rage. "This isn't over. I'll fight. That power of attorney is still valid." Jason merely shook his head, displaying the complete calm of a professional. "I have already filed a petition for an emergency protective order which freezes any transactions concerning Mr. Roberts' property and accounts. Try anything, and you will be arrested." The fury distorting Ryan's face spoke for itself. He silently, forcefully jerked his coat from the hanger and shoved his way roughly to the exit. Caroline rushed after him, and soon, through the window, they could be seen screaming at each other, their figures gesticulating sharply on the manicured lawn. Madison stayed. Quiet tears streamed down her cheeks. "I'm so sorry, Dad," she whispered, then turned to me. "And you, Olivia. I believed Ryan. I thought you were taking advantage of Dad. I'm so ashamed." Father, still sitting in his chair, with sudden warmth reached out and took her hand in his, and in that simple gesture was more forgiveness and understanding than in 1,000 words. Uncle Thomas hugged me tightly, and his voice trembled with restrained emotion. "You did it, dear. You saved him." For the first time in many weeks, I allowed myself to really look at my father. His eyes, once clouded and empty, were now clear, filled with firm resolve and deep sorrow. "Thank you," he said to me, and in that one word was a whole universe of pain and gratitude. "Thank you for not giving up on me." I hugged him tightly, pressed against his shoulder, and finally allowed myself to cry, quietly, liberatingly, shedding the burden of months of fear and despair. 3 months have passed since that memorable birthday. Father's condition improved at a remarkable speed, almost as soon as we stopped the laced sedatives. Within 2 weeks, his mind was completely clear. He was sharp, attentive, and engaged in life again. That thick, poisoned fog that had shrouded his mind had irrevocably dissipated. The results of the blood test conducted by Dr. Patel provided irrefutable evidence. High levels of strong sedative drugs, never prescribed by his doctor, were found in Father's system. This evidence was sufficient for the authorities. The prosecutor charged Deborah with elder abuse. She faced several years in prison, but ultimately took a plea deal, receiving a suspended sentence, probation, and a lifelong restraining order barring her from approaching my father. Their marriage was annulled due to fraud. The last I heard of her, she moved to Florida. Welcome to paradise. The blow that fell on Ryan was much harsher. He was charged with financial exploitation of an elderly person and conspiracy to commit fraud. The $50,000 he had stolen from father's accounts were thoroughly documented, and combined with the correspondence revealing their vile plot, he had not the slightest chance of acquittal. He lost his professional license, forever barring him from working as a financial analyst. His career was destroyed. He also received a suspended sentence with probation. But the most crushing blow to him was dealt by Caroline. She filed for divorce immediately after that ill-fated birthday. She, as it turned out, had had no idea about his affair with Deborah or the conspiracy against his own father. Her outrage knew no bounds. Her lawyers acted aggressively and mercilessly. She demanded the lion's share of their joint assets, and, given Ryan's criminal behavior, she had every chance of winning. Ryan called me once a month after everything came out. I never answered. He left a voicemail calling me every name in the book and blaming me for destroying his life. I deleted it without bothering to listen to the end. What struck me most in that monstrous story was not Ryan's cruelty or Deborah's hypocrisy, but Madison's unexpected transformation. A week after the celebration turned into a tribunal, she, accompanied by a chastened Andrew, returned to the Westchester mansion to sit down at the table with me and father and spoke words I never expected to hear from her. Her apology was filled with such sincere, bitter pain that it was impossible to doubt. "I was wrong about you," she said, looking at me with eyes wet from tears. "All these years I allowed myself to think you were just taking advantage of Dad, living off him, because it was incomparably easier than acknowledging my own dereliction, my refusal to bear part of the family burden." "I never lived off Dad," I replied softly but firmly, and she nodded, brushing away a treacherous tear from her cheek. "I know that now," she whispered. "You sacrificed everything, your career in Seattle, your independent future, your freedom, all for him. And I just sat comfortably at a distance and showered you with criticism." She broke down crying, and father, who had listened silently to her confession, reached out and took her hand in his, and in that simple gesture was more forgiveness and understanding than in 1,000 words. From that day on, Madison and Andrew started visiting regularly from Oregon every few weeks. And these visits, filled with shared dinners, leisurely conversations, and the quiet joy of reunion, gradually, step by step, turned us from strangers connected only by formal kinship into a real family. Uncle Thomas, our faithful ally, also continued his visits, which now became bright, joyful events. We would sit for a long time on the porch, sipping coffee and talking about things both trivial and important at the same time. And he would always bring sweets from his favorite Philadelphia bakery. "I'm proud of you," he told me once, and there were tears in his eyes. "You saved your father's life. You fought for him when everyone else, including his own children, chose to step back." I hired a part-time caregiver for father, a kind, conscientious woman named Rosa, who came 3 times a week, and this finally allowed me to reclaim a piece of my former independence. I found a remote job as a graphic designer for a tech company, which gave me not only a good income and a flexible schedule, but also an incredible, long-forgotten feeling of professional fulfillment. 6 months after the storm subsided, Madison made a wonderful suggestion. "We need to take Dad to Hawaii," she said. "Remember how he always told us he proposed to Mom on that very beach 45 years ago?" Father's eyes, when we told him about this idea, lit up with a light I hadn't seen in them since Mom's death. The 3 of us flew, Father, Madison, and I, staying at a hotel overlooking that legendary beach. We walked on the warm sand, dined in cozy restaurants, admired the dazzling sunsets, and Dad told us stories about Mom, about their youth, about the immense happiness they had found together. "She would be proud of both of you," he told us one evening, and his gaze lingered on me. "But especially you, Olivia. You're just like her, just as strong, devoted, willing to fight to the end for what truly matters." And I cried, but this time the tears were quiet, cleansing, and bright. We returned home to Westchester, to this colonial mansion inherited by Mom from her parents, to this house that was almost stolen from us, but which we defended. Now, Father and I sit on the porch every evening, watching the children ride their bikes, neighbors walk their dogs, and the sun slowly set behind the tops of the old maples. This house remains our family sanctuary, full of memories, filled with love, granting us long-awaited peace. 5 years ago, I left my career to care for my father. I almost lost him to people who saw him only as a wallet and a piece of real estate. But I stood my ground. I protected him. And, fighting for him, I found my own strength. My father is safe. My sister has returned to my life. My brother has to answer for his actions. And I, finally, have a future again. This is my story, and I am proud of how it ended.